Hello, and welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Eric Landrum, along with Garth Neufeld, your podcast hosts. As the name implies, we center on conversations about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the end stuff. This is episode number 138, where Garth had the opportunity to interview Christie Cathey from Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri. Before you hear the interview, please allow me to share some listening tips and some of my favorite moments. Now, I'm going to be a little bit more cryptic in some of my hints and clues so that you will listen to the episode. I don't need to lay it all out and give you the Cliff's Notes or Spark Notes so detailed that you don't even listen. But I do want to share some of my favorite moments. Garth and Christie start off really by talking about getting a chance to reminisce about NITOP, where they have this conversation, and they talk about the mask mandate that Christie's campus is involved with in the midst of the spring 2022 semester. That was important to hear because it's always interesting to hear about how other campuses are dealing with such issues. But one of the things they talk about early on that kind of repeats itself as a recurring theme through their conversation, and I'm not sure what label to put on it, but I'll try to do it this way. Whether you call this the trailing spouse or the dual career challenge. Christie has her doctorate in psychology. Her husband is a professor in philosophy. And for years, they their home base, they drove an hour and a half in different directions. And then you'll listen to the story that Christie tells. And I think they both made sacrifices, and Christie tells her side of it. And she made multiple career moves. And, I know it's hiring season for a lot of departments of psychology around the U.S. And it's just something that I think it's difficult to consider for a department, and it's a difficult challenge for couples, for partners to consider when they go on the job market, who want to be together. It's just a real challenge in this economy, and sometimes the living conditions and the cost of living in certain parts of the country. Anyway, it's a really important conversation that they have together. Another really good tip, and I'm just going to give you the hint here, go to parties. That's all I'm going to say. I hope you enjoy listening for why that is meaningful. I thought there was a really great conversation topic that Christie and Garth took a deep dive into when they talked about how do you keep it fresh. Christie has a job where her job is coordinating the Introduction to Psychology course, and then teaching another course about the teaching of psychology, where she teaches graduate students and advanced undergraduates how to be teaching assistants, student learning assistants for that course. And that is her full-time job responsibility, essentially, although she does talk about some research a little bit later on that she's doing. So if you've been doing that for 8, 9, 10 years, how do you keep it fresh? And so that's a really important conversation that I enjoyed listening to. There are some very practical tips that they talk about that they've implemented at Missouri State. One of them to listen for is the midterm wrapper. And one of the things you can really admire about the folks there, and there's a whole team of folks that have been working on this at Missouri State, is that they've been very empirical, very data-based. And Christie is a co-author, and I believe first author, on a few publications that they've put into the literature in the usual places like TOP and Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology, with Brooke Wisenhunt and Danae Hudson, and I think I know of others as well. They've been very scholarly in their redesign and reimplementation and continuous improvement of their Introduction to Psychology course. And by the way, they do this at scale. I'll let you listen for the number, but it's one of the larger courses in the country, I would imagine. And then I really enjoyed at the end and almost wished they'd had more time to delve into this. Christie did not start her undergraduate career as a psychology major. She started as an English major and had lots of different interests. And I think to this day, as you listen, you'll find out that she has a lot of different interests and interested in different cultures. And I think you'll hear that come through this interview. Please enjoy.
Listeners, we want to invite you to be among the first to know who and what's coming up on the Psych Sessions podcast. Join our opt-in email list, just like hundreds of psychology instructors have already done. We promise not to fill your inboxes. When we email you bi-weekly or monthly, it will be something that means something. From new series announcements to new opportunities, we invite you to join the mission to get free, high-quality professional development to all teachers of psychology. So sign up for our opt-in email list. Just go to bit.ly/psych sessions-email. That's all lowercase, bit.ly/psych sessions-email. I am here with Dr. Christie Cathey, Associate Professor of Psychology at Missouri State University. I always get your institution wrong, and I know 3 people who work there. I don't know what I'm thinking, but
What do you call it?
I don't know. What are the other colleges in the state?
University of Missouri.
Yeah, probably that one. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
No worries.
Welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see you in person. We're at NITOP right now. So
I'm glad to see everyone in person. Anyone in person right now. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. How long have you been coming to NITOP for?
My first time was in 2000. So, yeah, wow. Maybe not every single year. This is maybe my 10th-ish time. Yeah. I got a graduate student teaching award when I was in graduate school, and it came with some cash, and I had to spend it on something related to teaching. And I found this conference and came down here and thought I was in heaven. I remember talking to Jane Hallinan, thinking she was the best person in the world.
Have you told her that? Does she remember that?
She does not remember that. Okay. I did mention it to her once, but yeah. Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. So how has this thing changed over that time, or has it stayed pretty much the same? In my experience, it stayed kind of the same.
It has stayed really similar, down to even the little brochures that the little schedule.
Oh yeah. The
pamphlets look identical to the way they did 20-something years ago.
Gosh. I guess that's one of the alluring things about NITOP is you know exactly what you're going to get.
Yes.
It's as far as conferences go, it's not traveling around, and so for ACT or something like that, you don't know what the hotel's going to be like or what the city's going to be like, right? But this one's very predictable. I think I've been here this might be 3 or 4 times for me, because it's hard to get to. It's in my courses are in quarters, and we've already started so it's always week 1 of my winter quarter to come out here, and then it's expensive.
It's very expensive. Yeah. Yes, but they feed you well.
They
for that
do
cost,
feed us well. Are flights expensive from Springfield?
Typically, yes, but we had a direct flight available through Allegiant this time, which never ever happens. So,
really? Yeah. Is that new?
Yeah. Well, and you have to go on certain days of the week, so it's rare that those fall on exactly these dates for the conference, but they did this time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And you're traveling with a family member this time.
I am. I brought my 16-year-old daughter, so yeah, I took advantage of that cheap flight.
And she's just hanging out at the beach.
She's just chilling, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. She's doing a little college visiting while she's here.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
What's she seeing?
She went we have a scheduled trip to go see Eckerd College, which is 5 miles away.
Okay.
So she's super excited
you're doing that right after this?
We're going to go on Thursday morning. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so I'm excited to talk to you because we have friends in common and colleagues. Danae Hudson and Brooke Wisenhunt are your colleagues.
Yes.
And how long have you all worked together for?
I have been at Missouri State. I don't actually remember exactly how many years. This is my 8th or 9th year there. I started out at Missouri Southern State. So straight out of graduate school, I was at Missouri Southern State University, which is in Joplin. So I was there for 9 years. So that's why everything gets kind of muddled in terms of how long was I at different places.
Are you from Missouri?
I'm not. I'm actually from Arkansas, but I went to graduate school in Connecticut where I met my husband, who it was in the philosophy department. My graduate school advisor said, if you want to be a good social psychologist, you need to start hanging out with anthropologists and philosophers. And then I got an email from someone from philosophy saying you wanted to be on the softball team. So I thought, oh, my advisor said hang out with philosophers. So okay, I'll join it. So I ended up marrying him, right? And my advisor said, I told you to hang out with them, not to marry them. You're never going to get jobs in the same place. So we applied to jobs. We both got jobs in the state of Missouri, but we had to do a lot of commuting to get to them. So finally, we're now in the same
at some point
city.
in your career, it becomes a little easier, right? Well, I mean, I don't think it's ever easy to work at the same institution or to get both land jobs, but maybe the opportunities like just over time present themselves.
Yeah, and for some people they don't. It's a hard road for a lot of people. So we feel incredibly lucky to be in the same city.
How long have you guys both been there?
In this
at Missouri State.
Yeah, well, he's actually at a small liberal arts school in the same town. So we're not at the same institution.
I see.
Yeah. So, but we're in the same town anyway.
This sounds like a conversation we've actually had before, but because it sounds vaguely familiar to
who
me.
knows,
but how long were you commuting for those years or whatever?
We commuted for about 9 years, and then.
And what kind of distance were you covering?
Like an hour and a half. Each of us were going an hour and a half each way. So it got on.
Like most days of the week?
Yeah. Wow. And then we had children who were starting school, and it just became pretty tough.
So what, how are you all coping at Missouri State with pandemic and what's going on? You know, I'm from Seattle, so we have a different, I don't know. I think it's a different sort of response, culturally response to it. But how is it working itself out at your institution? So far,
the way it's working out at our institution is probably not that much different than yours, in that we do have a mask mandate. Our classes moved back to being seated. So we teach large sections of intro psych, 330 students. So starting this past fall, we were expected to be back in class. So we do have a mask mandate. For our class, we decided to drop the participation points we used to award for people coming to class because we didn't think it was right to really encourage people to come to class. We didn't want people coming to class just to get points if they didn't feel well. So our attendance dropped as a result, but the students who do come are very good at wearing their masks. Really high compliance with their masks.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. Did you guys ever go to remote? Or
we did. We went remote, March 2020.
Yeah.
With our class, we stayed. Everyone else in the institution went back to normal fall of 2020, but because of the size of our class, we started just making our classes optional. Which really dropped attendance very, very low.
Yeah.
And we just offered a few of those over the course of the semester.
Now, you teach, your intro psych course is already hybrid, right?
Correct.
So you have
we meet once a week.
Right. So a lot of those things are in place for people who are need to do it from home or whatever.
Right. So it was actually really nice. It wasn't that onerous for us to move the entire class online.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how people are dealing with this, especially with large sections too. It's just it's a different beast, right?
It is.
But you it's crazy to me. You all went back. People were not yet vaccinated and stuff, but you guys were back in person a few months after March, in August, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what was that like?
That's so funny. It really is the case that we were living two different pandemics, because you're like, whoa, what was it? But everyone in our area was back. And, my friends at University of Oklahoma without mask at the same time. So by comparison, we seemed like we were being very cautious.
Right.
So it's all a social comparison thing. Yeah. But it was not as anxiety provoking as I expected, but I think it's a little bit because of the environment that we were in. You just get acclimated to everyone's attitudes around you, whether you like it or not. So by the time we were back and, we'd have 50 people, let's say, in mask looking at us, we could manage.
Well, and definitely no judgment. I think I would have my kid didn't go to school for like a year, or she didn't go into a school classroom for a year and a half or whatever. And, I think that that's really hard on students. I think it's, it was hard on my child that she didn't have she's an only child. So she didn't get to go and have those social interactions and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know what the right or wrong way was to do this. I guess probably masks were a good idea right during that time. Did you have was there any major outbreaks amongst your students or anything like that, or faculty, or?
We had a little spike we had some students who were on campus prior to the start of fall 2020, student workers of some sort, some organization. And so we had kind of a spike among those students that kind of made some national news. Yeah. But then that kind of died down. But so there was a lot of talk about, what does this mean? What is this going to look like for us starting back in the fall? But otherwise, no. I mean, they would track, and we would always pay attention to the weekly counts and, freak out or relax, depending on what those numbers look like.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated about just teaching in the Midwest because it's just culturally different than where I am. And so let's talk about intro psych for a second. Yeah. And we can move on to whatever, but we cover a lot of topics in intro psych, and it's a science course. And how is it received by students in where, and it's not like I don't have conservative students. I definitely do. I'm on the outskirts of Seattle at Cascadia colleges, but, do you find do you guys talk as a department or, as an intro psych, group, about encounters with students and how are they receiving the science of psychology? Are you looking for more affordable, quality materials for your intro psych students? Check out Hawks Learning's mastery-based courseware and texts. These materials introduce foundational psychology and research concepts that inspire students of all majors to think more critically about the world around them. Students and instructors benefit from built-in support features like error-specific feedback, explanatory videos, and detailed progress reports. Explore Hawks Learning's mastery-based intro psych materials, available to students for as low as $43, and free chapter projects and example videos exclusively for Psych Sessions listeners at www.hawkslearning.com/psych sessions. Again, that's www.hawkslearning.com/psych sessions.
I will say that most of our students, the vast majority, are very receptive and appreciative of everything we present to them based on their behaviors anyway. And every now and then we'll get an email, especially when we talk about sexuality and gender. We'll ruffle some feathers and we'll get some emails. So we talk about those kinds of things. But I think if you pitch it as I'm presenting to you the field of psychology. Yeah. One thing that I am very careful to do is to never let my students know what my political leanings are, because I feel like if I do that, then everything else I say is going to be taken in the context of that. And what I think it'd be interesting to know. And I know from some research I've done that about half of my students are liberal and half are conservative. I would imagine, I hope this is the case, but I think if I were to ask them to guess my political leanings,
they'd guess their own.
I think they would guess their own if they like me. I think the ones who like me would assume that I share theirs, and I'm cool with that.
Yeah. What does that mean? If we just kind of play this out, this kind of scenario, what does it mean? It means that you have kind of successfully aligned with your students in some way, right? They feel like a rapport with you, in that sort of case. Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't have a problem with self-disclosing to students generally, but I am not volunteering any information to my students because it can get in the way of teaching for sure. Yeah. If you do that.
Well, I just think I think our students receive messages, a lot of them do, from home, from media, that these liberal professors are out to brainwash you. Yep. And so I'm not out to do that. No. I'm out to present science to them, and I don't want them to view science as if I'm brainwashing. So if they...
Yeah, so in intro psych, I talk about like ways of knowing. I think I originally got that from maybe Dave Meyer's book. Like there's many different ways of knowing, and science is one way of knowing. But you know, how much do we get out? And maybe I'll just pass this to you. Do you get out in front of some of these conversations by like saying up front, this perspective is a scientific perspective? How do you talk to your students about like what psychology is? And maybe my question's not quite clear. So, I'll just tell you what I would do then. Okay. So there are times where, I'll say to my students, who don't know me in this brand new class, and I want to introduce them to psychology, instead of waiting for like something to come up, like an issue, maybe the sex, gender, whatever issue, I will prep them for those kinds of things by saying, this is not a belief. This is not my opinion. This is psychological science, right? Do you find yourself prefacing some topics?
Oh, absolutely.
With that? Okay.
Yeah, especially the sex and gender chapter. Yeah. Okay. And I do that, but I start setting that stage early in the semester, as if all, I give them sort of a snapshot of what we're going to be talking about over the course of the semester and try to lay that foundation early, anticipating some of those problems with students. Yeah. But so far, I mean, and I will say, I've been doing this for 20 years in Southwest Missouri now. I notice fewer and fewer of students who get kind of tightly wound about these issues over time. Right. So I really do think Gen Z students are much different.
Fascinating.
In a good way. Mm-hmm. In a really good way.
For sure. So you've been teaching intro for 20 years?
I have. Wow. Yeah, 20. Yeah, 20 this year.
Wow. Yeah. That's insane. That's a lot. You've taught a lot of students introductory psychology, right?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's is that like your area is social, right?
It is. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm guessing you teach other classes too, right?
Actually, at Missouri State, I really came on as the coordinator for intro psych. So my world is intro psych now. Okay. So I teach intro psych, and I teach the teaching of psychology, which is our course designed to train the undergraduate assistants who work inside our large classes. But that's what I do right now. My whole world is intro psych.
Wow. Okay. So tell me, what are the logistics of running an intro psych course there at Missouri State? So do you have graduate students that are helping out?
So we have large sections. Brooke and Danae were in the group who really redesigned this course, and it's really shown some great outcomes. But we have large sections, 330 students. For each section, we have one faculty, we call them senior learning assistants, SLAs. These are graduate assistants. And then we have 6 to 7 undergraduate teaching assistants who help with the course.
Okay. And so is part of your job like working with all those folks as well?
Yeah, working with all those folks, working to help recruit the undergraduate assistants, the application process, the interview process for those kinds of things, working with the graduate assistants.
Well, I know a couple of folks who do what you do at other institutions, right? They run intro psych programs, but how many like places actually have somebody coordinating all of that? Is that a normal thing for larger institutions, or
that I don't know? Okay. I really don't know.
How many? Who preceded you, or was it a new position?
It was a new position.
And why did they think that they needed a coordinator, and what were they doing beforehand?
Right. Yeah. So there was a group of faculty who had gone through this redesign process. And Danae Hudson was the primary person in charge of it. But she was doing that on top of her other duties. And she needed to be teaching her clinical courses and working with the graduate program in clinical. So they argued that we need a person specifically dedicated to this course.
Okay. It has honestly been so many years since I've had this conversation with Danae, but it's all coming back now, that like how this all came about. So at that point, were you already there at the college?
I was not.
You weren't?
No. Okay, so my deal was I was at Missouri Southern State. And as I mentioned, and I was tenured. I was 1 year from going up for full professor. And this is maybe more of a story than you want to hear.
The Psych Sessions podcast is brought to you by Macmillan Learning Psychology. Macmillan Learning's Achieve for Psychology sets a whole new standard for integrating assessments, activities, and analytics into your teaching. And Achieve is now home to Macmillan Learning's extraordinary new video collections for introductory psychology, lifespan development, and abnormal psychology. Developed in partnership with a faculty and student advisory board, the collections include much in-demand classic clips, contemporary footage, and exclusive original content. Each is a remarkably rich and diverse resource, with videos tagged to the 7 themes in the American Psychological Association's new Introductory Psychology Initiative. So see for yourself and tell us what you think. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an exclusive preview. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology. Engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning.
It was a long drive for me we had moved to Springfield because so that's where my husband was working. So that meant an hour and a half drive for me to go to Joplin to work. So I would spend the night with friends to make my some nights. So the first night I did this, we'd had a glass of wine with my friends. We were hanging out. I got a call from my husband saying the house is on fire. When I had a kid who was 2 and one who was 5, it turned out to be a small kitchen fire. No major damage done. All was fine. But I got on the phone and called our local community college the next day and said, I can't do this anymore. Are you going to have any openings in psychology? And she actually said, yes, we have one coming up for next fall. I applied for that. So I was actually at our community college, Ozarks Technical Community College, for 2 years. So I just left behind that other position because I hated the commute so much. So when I started at Missouri State, I'd actually been at that community college for a couple of years.
Wow. Okay.
And I loved every minute of that.
How did you
gig.
make that must have been such a really difficult decision to leave your tenure track position?
It wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah. I hate driving kind of more than anything. And I really hate, I was driving on I-44, which is just semis flying by me all the time. And I was exhausted all the time. And I thought, this is not how I want to live my life. Do I prefer to have this tenure track job? Sure. I loved my colleagues there. I loved everything about the gig. But I wanted to live I wanted to be part of the community where I worked.
Right.
That was really important to me.
Yeah.
And the community college was a great place. So it wasn't like I was leaving something great to go to something terrible. I was leaving something great to go to something else great. So, but I thought, and my husband told me, like, this is it for you. You will never have another tenure track job. And I said, I understand that.
Yeah.
And then this whole thing came about with intro psych. So yeah, it worked out.
Wow. Okay. So then you're at that community college for a couple of years. And was that a tenure track position?
It was not. There's no such thing there.
No such thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were full-time for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then how did you hear about this job?
Got a call from Brooke Wisenhunt one day saying, hey, we have this new position.
And how did you all know each other?
We met each other at a party in Springfield. I don't know, 15 years ago or so,
just
maybe
some
longer.
Random party where psychologists hang out?
Yeah, just some random party, or just some random party. And she said she was from Arkansas, and we exchanged where, and she said, and I told her where I was from, and she said, oh, I have relatives there, and she kind of gave their names, and so I got on the phone with my mother after that, my very old mother, and she goes, oh yeah, that's Bill Leslie's daughter. Her uncle pulled out your sister Lisa's wisdom teeth, and her aunt Olga was my 5th grade math teacher, and it just went on and on and on and on, and then I realized I'd gone to summer camp with her sister, actually knew her dad, so we had all these family connections, so that's how I met her.
Yeah,
and we have kids exactly the same age, so we were friends.
Well, and that's really cool that she thought of you, or they thought of you for this position and invited you to apply. I mean, that just is like, that's so affirming, right?
Yeah, it was great. Well, and they knew that intro psych was kind of my thing. And when I was at the community college, I was the lead instructor for intro there. And so I'd had some communications with them about our intro program. So they knew that kind of intro psych was already my baby.
Had they overhauled it yet?
Okay. They were 3 or 4 semesters into the overhaul at that point. Yeah.
All right. Okay, but they needed to do different things after that, and they needed somebody to come take it over.
Exactly.
Okay, so how many different people teach intro now?
So right now we have, there are 3 of us who are full-time, and then we have a per course person who's been with the university for 20 years, so a long time, very consistent.
Yeah. Okay.
Per course.
Yeah. And the other course is teaching of psychology.
Correct.
Okay. Tell me about that course. I know that there's a few of our colleagues who teach that course, that are here right now. Or maybe it's not exactly that. What is it?
It's different than, for example, Missy's teaching of psychology course, in that this course really is very focused on teaching or helping prepare our undergraduate assistants to do the work that they do specifically for our course. So, for example, they lead small group study sessions. So teaching them how to deliver those study sessions is a big focus of that course.
How much credit do they get for?
It's a 3-credit course. It's an upper level psychology class. This is only open for psychology majors. They can do it up to 2 times, so they can get up to 6 credits for it. And they love it.
How do you choose? Like, what's the application process like for those students?
We send an email to students who meet our criteria, a certain grade point average, a certain number of hours under their belt, etc., and ask for applications. They send in an application. We send out come interview with us. So we have interviews. Lately, it's been done via Zoom, thanks to COVID. Then we make our selections and. Yeah. Wow. So it's kind of an ordeal to select the students.
What a cool opportunity for students.
Oh, they love it.
Yeah.
They absolutely love it.
Imagine the skills that they develop just by doing that.
Yeah. We did a little study a few years ago. We looked at, so our students, when they graduate, take the majors field exam test their senior year. So we looked at our students' scores on that test, specifically there were questions about psychology. We looked at our students who had been these undergraduate learning assistants for us, and we compared them to similar students. So we matched based on GPA, and we found that our students who had served in this role scored significantly higher than did those who hadn't served in the role. And moreover, students who had done it twice scored significantly higher than those who had just done it once, suggesting that it really was this process of serving in this role. I think it was really the teaching other students themselves really solidified their understanding of psychology concepts. So, yeah.
Yeah. What kind of feedback do you get from them? They just love it?
They love it. Yeah. Brooke was telling me the other day that she had gotten a comment. Actually, she and I take turns teaching the teaching of psychology class. So she taught it this last fall. And in one of her evals, the student said it was by far the most meaningful academic experience she had in her career, just because of the...
Yeah, and these students aren't necessarily going to be teachers of psychology, right? They're just... But they're doing it. Where do your students transfer to? Or I guess they don't transfer.
Yeah.
Where do they go to next?
All kinds of different places.
Really?
We have some who go into terminal master's programs. We have some who occasionally who get into PhD programs. But they all say, and we've collected data about their perceptions of the course, and we've asked them, what are the best things about having done it? And one of the things they say is that it helps them know if teaching is a path for them. And some say this really helped me understand that teaching is what I want to do. And some say I discovered this ain't for me. But they say that's useful information.
Really
so
useful.
It's good for them to get that sort of feedback about what they enjoy and what they want to do.
Yeah. How do you keep it fresh for yourself? Because you do the same thing a lot. The same thing, right?
Yeah. Like I used to have so much variety. Yeah. I used to teach a wide range. I think I taught like 12 different course titles before, and now it's all this one baby.
Yeah.
So how do I keep it fresh? Oh goodness, I'll tell you, I've been struggling with that since COVID.
Sure.
Just because maybe that's a common thing that we're all experiencing right now. But I think it's one thing I guess I think about when I go into any class is what is it that interests me most? And that changes over time. Mm-hmm. So if I can focus on that. So for example, I think you today in your talk were talking about this imposter syndrome. A lot of people feel with teaching intro psych because we think, I don't like for me, it was the bio chapter and the sensation and perception chapter that freaked me out the most, that made me feel most like an imposter. So I will tell you that sensation and perception is now my very favorite class to teach. And I think it's because I had to come about it like, I cannot master all of this, but what I can do is take the stuff that I find most interesting and pimp it out so that it's like as interesting and entertaining to the students as possible. So I guess that's my answer. That's a long-winded answer to how do you keep it fresh.
Well,
but I think that's kind of my approach is take in what I consider interesting to me at that time. Like I'm super right now interested in mindfulness and self-compassion. So anytime I can work in those kinds of topics into my own classes, that's what I do.
What do you like about sensation and perception now? Because that's one that, that's one that I kind of skip a little bit. I talk about sensation and perception kind of generally, but I don't really get into like all the illusion stuff. And I haven't gone there. What do you do?
Well, and maybe I would, for example, I don't talk about the ear. I mean, I'm sure there are people who would just like, oh my gosh, you have to talk about the hammer.
Talk about the ear.
So because that's not what grabs me. So what do I focus on that? I mean, I just think what I find most fascinating is, holy cow, we have all of the sensory information coming in at us all the time. Mm-hmm. What does our brain do with that information to turn it into what we perceive? Yeah. And I'm really interested in our individual differences in those perceptions. So, like I even throw in a contrast effect demonstration just to illustrate how the context can influence how you take in or how you interpret sensory information.
Yeah. So it's hard to make psychology boring, isn't it? I think Jane Hallinan tells me that all the time. Like, you have to work really hard to make psychology boring. Yeah. All this stuff is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Right?
So, yeah, exactly.
So you also do research, right? And so that must keep you busy or keep things fresh. What have you, what kind of research have you been doing over the years? Is it all like with intro psych?
Lately, that is really what I've been focused on lately. And I told you I'm really interested in, for example, self-compassion now. So I started a self-compassion lab. So we call it self-compassion in learning. So ways of embedding self-compassion interventions into for a large group of students is kind of what we're focused on now.
Okay, tell me more about that. Some details. What are you doing?
Yeah. So are you very into the self-compassion research at all? Do you know much about it?
No, I don't know anything.
Yeah. So Kristen Neff is kind of who's at UT Austin is a big name in self-compassion research. Self-compassion has Buddhist roots, which is also part of what really draws me to it. But it's this idea that when we encounter struggles or challenges or shortcomings in ourselves, we tend to run away from those or deny that they're happening or they're painful, right? So we turn away from it. And if you think about our students, when they don't perform as they hoped they would, we don't want them running away from that information. We want them to be with those feelings. But how do you do that? So self-compassion is this idea that, first of all, there's a component of mindfulness. So being okay with feeling uncomfortable. And then there's an aspect of self-kindness. So talking to the self as you would to a good friend. So really like comforting the self. And then an aspect of common humanity, like recognizing that all students in this case experience these kinds of feelings, right? So there's some really good work that shows that just simple writing prompts where you talk to yourself about a shortcoming with self-kindness and focusing on common humanity can increase motivation, can help students perform better after a failure. So we're looking at ways of embedding those kinds of writing prompts into existing assignments. So it's really fun stuff. And I have a group of undergraduates who are working on the research with me. And
okay.
Yeah.
How long is this project going to go for, you think?
Oh, I don't know. I'm kind of at a cool point in my career. I feel like I want to give undergraduates a chance to experience the research project. So I'll do this as long as I have undergraduates who are interested in working on these with me. So I'm doing a poster here about some of our self-compassion work and have a number of undergraduates who were authors on that. So, like before I was all intro, one of my favorite classes to teach was a senior thesis. We required a senior thesis of all psychology majors. So I really miss working on research with students. So this is my way of,
And so this is just you had this idea and you have the freedom to put it into practice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Who's your boss? Is that right? No, like how is it structured? Like, who do you report to? Or
my department head.
Your department head.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. Intro psych. The intro psych coordinator is under the department head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a great gig. I mean, we're expected to be productive with research, but I'm not expected to produce within the field of social psychology, for example. So the scholarship of teaching and learning is highly valued in my institution. So
awesome.
Yeah, all of these kinds of projects are completely supported.
Right. And so you take these, like the self-compassion thing that directly helps students, right? And then you can infuse it into the course, right? And you have like these large courses that you can...
Yeah, you can target a lot of students at once. Mm-hmm. So for example, we just have the way we embed it is we have a midterm wrapper assignment. So if you've heard of exam wrappers, right? But this is something we do at midterm that has students reflect not just on one exam, but on all of their performance for the first half of the semester. Because we find that especially weaker students tend to kind of put their heads in the sand for the second half of the semester. They don't really like to focus on what they've done or where they've messed up in the first half. So we really want them to focus. Like, what are you doing now? What have you done so far? And what kind of changes are you going to make? And so we piloted that assignment, this midterm wrapper. It's all done online. They reflect on their grades, come up with a plan for the future. And we found that students who did that assignment scored on an average 4% higher at the end of the semester than did those who didn't. And it was mostly driven by their just actually completing assignments, which was cool, right? So that seemed like a really good vehicle for embedding the self-compassion manipulation. So students have just been thinking about, what have I done? And we ask them to talk about a shortcoming that they've had. And then we can manipulate whether they talk about that with self-compassion or in terms of self-esteem control, which is think about something else you do good. So maybe you have this academic shortcoming, but think about something else you excel at. And
yeah, that's fun. It seems like you've got a really good gig where you get to play.
I love my gig. Yeah. I can't imagine anything, better.
Oh, that's fun. What else are we missing from like that we haven't covered about your work, your present work experience, or your position there at Missouri State? Is there anything we missed on?
No, okay. Nothing we missed on. I don't know if you want to. One thing that I think is a core thing that I'm interested in. I don't know if you want to even talk about this, but cultural psychology has always been what I've always been super passionate about. So probably the best, the biggest high I've ever been on with my job was taking students on trips abroad to do research abroad. Yeah. So I would really that's on my bucket, because I'm at the point now where I'm thinking okay, I don't have a whole lot of years left in this work. What do I want to do? So my bucket list is to do at least one more study abroad trip with psychology students, because I think that was the kind of the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Yeah. Where have you taken students to?
I've taken students 2 trips to France and 1 to China. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And did you just thrive in there? You love it?
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. And they did. So, and
how many students were you taking?
Between small groups, between 6 to 12. So very small groups.
And what kind of things were you studying?
So it was kind of like a research methods class, different things. So the one in China, it was actually a self and culture class. So we read a lot of Confucianism and related that to psychology. So that was a fun one. But the ones to France were research methods classes. So they did an observational study. So for example, they went to a McDonald's in Joplin and then a McDonald's in a similar sized town in France and observed eating behaviors as an example. Wow. And then they did a survey that they then had translated into France, and we visited a French classroom and distributed the survey, some sort of attitudinal study. I can't even remember what. So just a way for them to practice their research skills, but to do it in 2 different countries.
Yeah, man, you seem to give students these really cool experiences. It seems to be like a strength of yours is to give students, whether it's these research experiences in abroad or even, and I know that you didn't probably come up with the teaching, or what do you call them? Senior learning assistants. That was not my baby at all. But it's really neat to hear that your students are getting such varied experiences. Yeah. And part of this is me at a community college, I'm picking your brain because it's just so different. There is an abroad, there's an opportunity to teach abroad, but it's more on the statewide level. It's not on the institutional level, but research methods would be a very cool course to take overseas, I think.
Yeah.
That's
it was fun stuff.
Was your specialty, I know you're in social, but was it cross-cultural?
That wasn't my area in graduate school. I was in my dissertation was about attitude change and in the realm of political psychology. But I've always been really, really interested in cultural psychology. So when I would go to SPSP, I would always go to the culture pre-conference because that was always what drew me. We spent a semester teaching in China, so it's always been kind of what has drawn me most. Even I would say my interest in cultural psychology is really based in my interest in Eastern perspectives like Buddhism. So, yeah.
So you said that you did work on changing political attitudes? Is that?
Yeah.
What did you learn there? It's kind of relevant, right? Right now?
Yeah. And that's been so long ago. You know how it is. What is your dissertation about? I don't even remember. Yeah. No, we were looking at, really, it was about how do you not change attitudes as much as, let me think how to say this. How do you frame an issue so that, when we talk about politicians speaking out of both sides of their mouths, what they're doing is framing that issue in ways that appeal to group A and then to group B. So it was about the framing of political messages and how those frames matter. And moreover, you can argue that the person who wins is the one who is successful at getting the world to adopt their framing of an issue. So you can think about various ways we can frame, the COVID issue.
Yeah. Do you, with that knowledge, do you see our current kind of political divide differently? Do you perceive it as when somebody when Biden wins the presidency or when Trump wins the presidency, do you think through how they are framing things especially for Trump, because he was talking all the time, tweeting all the time, right? So does that expertise and that experience, do you think you have some different insights than maybe the regular person?
I don't know that I have any special insights. I think it's just so it just makes me so sad.
I know.
Like, why is wearing a mask? How did the framing of that, like, to me, it's so obvious that the framing of that is about protecting everyone else, our most vulnerable. That seems to me to be, personally, the only framing that makes sense. But how is wearing a mask about personal freedom? That's what's so sad to me, that took root. And same with vaccines. Yeah. So, but I think we see that, and I think we're so siloed in terms of the information that we get. These framings are so, it's like we're living in different worlds in terms of the framings of these things that we're receiving. But
I only have you for a few more minutes, but I do want to ask, like, how did you come to study psychology? How did that become a thing for you?
I wanted desperately to work in advertising when I was an undergraduate. Like, I wanted to be a jingle writer. Like, that was my dream job. So I started out as an English major. I was at a small liberal arts college, Hendrix College, which, by the way, is where I share that with Charles Brewer. So I was, cool. I bask in reflected glory when I say that, right? The great Charles Brewer. But I wanted to go into advertising. I was an English major, and then I was briefly a French major because I didn't know what I'm going to do. But I took my first social psychology class, and in the attitudes and persuasion chapter is what made me think, oh, this is going to help me in my career in advertising. So I graduated with my psychology degree, worked in advertising my first year out, and thought, oh, I hate this. I really, really hate this.
What was it?
It just felt kind of gross. I felt like I was trying to sell things to people who they didn't need them, and it just, I don't know. Yeah,
it's manipulative, right? It's
And maybe if I had been making more money and hadn't been at the very bottom, maybe I would have been singing a different tune. Maybe that's just my justification for it. But, my way of saying it is, I was above that. Maybe that's not actually accurate. But,
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So you decided you hated it.
Yeah, I decided I hated it. But then I remembered that, oh my gosh, but and the thing I loved about psychology, I don't think I would have returned to it had I not had really great instructors in research methods. And then I took an advanced social psychology class where we did a lot of our own independent research. And I loved that more than anything. So I would nerd out and go to the library in the city where I was living when I was working in this advertising agency, like the university library, because you couldn't just Google articles. But I was really still interested in reading from the field of social psychology. And so I thought, oh, I should listen to this. This is what's drawing me. So that's what led me to apply to graduate school. Okay.
And so your graduate school was where?
University of Connecticut.
University of Connecticut. Yeah. Okay. And there you were right into a PhD program, to a social program. Yeah. Okay. And then postdoc or anything after that?
Directly to. Now, I did spend a year between that advertising gig and graduate school studying in Grenoble, France, through a Rotary International Scholarship. And so they kind of threw me. I was taking low-level undergraduate classes in psychology, but happened to meet a social psychologist there who had done his work here in the U.S. So he's kind of helped me to do some research while I was there. Yeah. So I think that was kind of the experience that probably helped me get into graduate school. And so that was a good year.
And then at some point in graduate school, well, what did you think your career was going to be when you went to graduate school?
Oh my gosh. So when I applied to graduate school, I would tell my students never ever do this, but I wrote in my statement that I wanted to be at a small teaching college, that I wanted to focus on teaching. And I can't even believe they let me in. So I knew always that I wanted to focus on teaching. R1s did not speak to me in any way. But I would never tell an undergraduate to write that in their statement. Right. So that's always what I wanted to do. Wow. So I sought out as many teaching opportunities as I could while I was a graduate student to try to make that my career path.
Well, now, that's really neat. And now you're influencing so many students in large sections of introductory psychology. It's cool to see how this has come kind of full circle for you.
Yeah, I feel very lucky. It's been a fun ride.
Awesome. Well, hey, I have taken up a bunch of your time. I appreciate you sitting down with me. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Your story was just really fun to hear. So thanks.
Thanks, Garth.